the two avenues we're going to explore for this episode is going to be the avenue of Gilead and the avenue of Chicago. So we'll start off with what I think is the lesser of the two interesting avenues. First, we'll start off with Gilead. So basically, in this episode, Commander Lauren approaches the council and says, "Hey, I want to propose a ceasefire on all of our contested fronts, which include Chicago, Texas, and I think he said one other place. I can't remember off the top of my head what it was. I'd have to go back and check. But anyways, the reason being he proposes this ceasefire to the Council of Gilead is because of the fact that he says, hey, you can't win wars just with bullets. You have to be a little bit more strategic. We need money. We need economic needs in order to keep up the fight. And basically, the council basically shits on that proposal. They think it's interesting, but they're like, no, we can crush our enemies. We have a really strong military. And that's one thing that they make pretty clear in this episode is that they have a very strong military, but I'll touch on that in just a little bit. So basically, like I said, Council tells him no, and then Commander Lawrence in private basically tells Nick, hey, just so you know, June might be in one of those contested areas, Chicago included, so you might want to rethink what you're saying. And Nick's like, look, if June was in one of those areas, I'd know about it. And then he's like, all right, we'll see. Well, Nick follows up on that, and Nick actually does find out that June is, in fact, in Chicago. So he goes up to Commander Lawrence and tells him, hey, I'll support you in whatever you need because you don't want to keep up a war going where the person you love is obviously occupying, right? So that makes for some really, really interesting stuff going forward. But meanwhile, while all of this is going on, we actually get a glimpse back at Aunt Lydia. And Aunt Lydia is still recovering from her injuries. You can tell that her facial scars have healed, her bruising's healed. She is pretty much back in full health. In fact, when we see her, she's like walking on the treadmill, just kind of looking outside and observing, and she sees the next, what she calls, class of handmaids um, being, I guess, talked to by their aunt for doing whatever it is that they do. But in the middle of this, she's actually interrupted by another aunt, one who is, I believe, of superior ranking, and she basically tells her, "Hey, you're no longer going to be taking charge of any handmaids." And this really crushes Aunt Lydia because it's what she lives for. You know, it's something that she has proven time and time and again in this episode that she lives to basically, for lack of a better term, train and guide handmaids. So she'll do anything she can to retain that post. And this kind of harks back a little bit to our conversation from last week's episode, where I posed the question: will Aunt Lydia ever change her mind about Gilead? Will her mind and her set of thinking ever shift back to what it was like pre-Gilead? And I think this is evidence to that she never will. I think she truly believes in what Gilead is doing and what she is doing, so I don't think we'll ever see her character really change in that respect throughout the episode. But I just wanted to touch on that a little bit before moving on within this episode. So I don't think she'll change very much on her stance on that. So just keep that in mind going forward. So basically, she'll do anything to get back her post. So what does she do? She goes to Commander Lawrence first and she blackmails him. She basically says, "Hey, I have a lot of dirt on you and I can make life very difficult for you. So I want you to reinstate me right now." And Commander Lawrence is like, "Oh, you're going to have to do better than that. What other dirt do you have on all of the other commanders?" Because of the fact of this, Commander Lawrence, in order to get his ceasefire, would be, and have more power in general, would be much better suited if he were actually on the council because he'd have a lot more say in what's going on. And Aunt Lydia would also benefit from that because if he has more say on the council, he can reinstate Aunt Lydia immediately. And since he's on the council, nobody's going to say anything otherwise. So he basically proposes, hey, Aunt Lydia, why don't we team up? Because I know you have dirt on the other commanders on the council. And if we use that, I get what I want and you get what you want. And then Aunt Lydia says, okay, fine, but on one condition, we get June back here and I get to discipline her. And then he says, yeah, that's fine with me. And I'm like, wow, holy shit. Okay, so now they're gonna team up and blackmail basically all the other commanders on the council. And plus, for Commander Lawrence to say, I could live with that, to Aunt Lydia wanting June back to discipline her, it makes me wonder about him as a character again because when June was escaping, um, or I'm sorry, helping all of the other Martha's children and handmaids escape, he seemed very hellbent on cleaning up his mess, as he put it. And I think this is just more evidence of the contrary. I don't know if he actually meant what he what he said when he said that or not, but I guess we'll have to kind of keep that in mind and stay tuned to find out. But anyways, um, I think it Commander Lawrence is kind of like going back to his old ways of being in the strength of Gilead, and I have a small theory and small caveat on this that it makes me wonder. It's like, okay, is he going back to his old ways? Was all that stuff he told June just bullshit? Or is he actually trying to get to the very top of Gilead in order to just tear it all down one day? Because if he can, for lack of a better term, infiltrate the council and then become, for lack of a better term, the head, the leader of Gilead, he could hypothetically change everything and tear it back down again to ashes and return the world to what its normal state was like before Gilead. So I don't with what he's been doing, I don't think that my theory is going to be correct, but I can dream, can I? And I guess we'll have to stay in tune to find out throughout the other episodes. But it'd be a really fascinating strategy if my theory were correct. So I guess we'll have to wait and find out. But anyways, so Commander Lawrence is now they go through with their plan. Aunt Lydia blackmails the other commanders. Commander Lawrence is now on the council. He gets what he wants, and Nick basically he tells the council in one of their meetings, "Hey, I want to revisit the ceasefire because now that he knows that June is in Chicago, he's kind of rethinking his situation. Like I mentioned earlier before we trailed off to Aunt Lydia, he tells Commander Lawrence, I'll support you whenever you need. Well, Nick is getting ready right now to have the conversation and support Commander Lawrence, but then as soon as he brings it up, all the commanders are like, oh yeah, we totally support it now. And Nick's kind of like, wait, you guys were so opposed not too long ago. What changed? And they say, oh yeah, we forgot to tell you. And Commander Lawrence is at this table at the same token, that showing us as the audience that he's not on the council. And he's like, oh yeah, we forgot to tell you. Right before the ceasefire, you're going to coordinate an attack and you're going to bomb the living hell out of all these different contested areas. And then we're going to send in aid to help everybody out. So basically, what happened is Commander Lawrence is now double crossed Nick, and now Nick has to basically coordinate a large mass scale bombing where June is currently occupied. So very interesting to see what the follow-up between Nick and Commander Lawrence is going to be for the next few episodes because of the fact that it's like, okay, to me, they're on the same team. Nick saved Commander Lawrence's ass in the very first episode when convincing the council to bring him in as a consultant, and now he's kind of stomping on that, which I think is a really questionable move and idea, but I'm curious to see how the show is going to play out that situation in particular. But there's a very I think this particular moment is very telling of Gilead's philosophy because, like I said, they're going to do this bombing and then they're going to send in aid immediately after. So, what they're doing is they're doing the strategy where they hurt their enemies and they heal them. They hurt their enemies and they heal them. And this is going to sound a little morbid, but to me, it's a really fascinating tactic to use on your enemies. I don't know if you guys just stay with me on this for a second here, but I think that if any of you have ever read the book by George Orwell, 1984, there's moments in there where they talk about when you use this strategy of you hurt your enemies and then you heal them. You hurt them, you heal them. You hurt them, you heal them. You start to develop this cadence in the situation you're in against your enemies where you're showing that you have control over them in whatever situation you're in, and in a really weird way it makes your enemies develop a sort of love for you, which I think is just there's a psychological phenomenon there that's really fascinating that I think Gilead is using. I'm not knowledgeable enough on it in particular to give you more details, but I think that the fact that Gilead is using this is very interesting. Like I said, it sounds morbid as hell, but it's just weird that they would use this tactic, and there must be a reason that they're doing it. So it's like, are they trying in a weird way to get enemies on their side? Are they just trying to show their power over them? Because either way, this option might work, and it's really scary because one, like I mentioned earlier, they make clear in this episode that Gilead's military is extremely powerful, and two, what does that mean for the larger world of the Handmaid's Tale? Like, is Gilead just going to keep growing? Will the rest of the world have to step in and stop Gilead from what they're doing? How does the rest of the world besides Canada feel about this whole situation? Because sooner or later it could probably start a world war, but I'd be fascinated to see how further episodes get into that. I think this is what this is all leading to, but we'll have to excuse me, stay in tune to find out. So really, really fascinating stuff, but that pretty much does it for going through the Gilead avenue of this episode. Now